We live our lives suspended in a delicate, invisible web of assumptions. It is a web so fundamental to our existence that we are rarely, if ever, aware of its presence. We assume, with a certainty that borders on instinct, that the floor beneath our feet is solid, that the sun will rise in the east tomorrow morning, that the person we spoke to yesterday is the same continuous consciousness we are speaking to today. We assume that time flows in a single, inexorable forward direction, that cause must always precede effect, that the fundamental, elegant laws of physics are constant and unbreakable, the same here as they are in the most distant galaxy. We build our entire understanding of the world, our careers, our relationships, our very sense of self, upon the unshakable bedrock of a shared, consistent, and predictable reality. We believe, without ever really thinking about it, that the world we perceive is real. But what if it isn't? What if the very fabric of the reality we experience every day, the feeling of the wind on our skin, the complex symphony of flavors in our morning coffee, the intricate, sprawling, and often unreliable tapestry of our memories is not the bedrock, but a beautifully rendered, incredibly complex, and ultimately artificial illusion? What if our universe, in all its vastness and complexity, is a kind of program, a cosmic simulation of such profound and convincing fidelity that its inhabitants, us, could never perceive its true nature? This idea, known in modern parlance as the simulation hypothesis, is not a new one. It is one of the oldest and most persistent questions in human philosophy. It is Plato's allegory of the cave, where prisoners mistake shadows on a wall for reality. It is the dream argument of the 17th century philosopher René Descartes, who wondered how he could ever be certain that he was not, at this very moment, asleep and dreaming. It is the modern, computational musings of thinkers like Oxford's Nick Bostrom and the tech visionary Elon Musk. For most people, for most of history, this has been a fascinating but purely abstract thought experiment, a philosophical puzzle to be debated over wine or in a university classroom. But for a growing and increasingly vocal number of people, it is becoming something more tangible, more personal, and more urgent. They are the ones who claim to have experienced a crack in the facade, a moment where the seamless, elegant code of our world seems to stutter, to lag, to reveal a bug in the system. They have experienced what the Internet, with its genius for coining the perfect term, has collectively named a glitch in the matrix. The term, of course, was catapulted into the popular consciousness by the 1999 science fiction masterpiece The Matrix, where a moment of déjà vu with hero Neo, seeing the same black cat walk by twice eyes, revealed to be a sign that the simulated world has been changed by its architects, a momentary visible flaw in the grand illusion. But the real-world stories that people report are often far stranger, more personal, and more profoundly unsettling than a simple, fleeting case of déjà vu. They are stories of impossible, statistically absurd coincidences. They are stories of physical objects duplicating or disappearing into thin air. They are stories of ordinary people becoming trapped in inexplicable, repeating time loops. They are stories of strangers on the street behaving like non-player characters, or NPCs, from a video game, stuck on a repeating animation cycle, their free will seemingly replaced by a faulty script. Today, we are going to explore this strange, mind-bending, and increasingly widespread phenomenon. We will compile and dissect some of the most compelling, detailed, and well-documented glitch in the Matrix stories that have been shared from every corner of the world. We will look at cases of temporal loops that last for minutes or even hours. We will investigate doppelganger encounters that defy rational explanation. We will examine stories of objects that seem to defy the fundamental laws of physics. And we will explore those deeply uncanny moments where reality itself seems to freeze, to buffer, and to restart, like a computer struggling with a demanding piece of software. Throughout this journey, we will explore the possible rational, scientific explanations for these events, the known tricks of memory, the strange quirks of human perception, the bizarre and often counterintuitive wiring of the human brain. But we will also allow ourselves to ask the bigger, more unsettling, and perhaps more important question. Are these stories just strange neurological events, the misfirings of our own internal hardware? Or are they fleeting, precious, and terrifying glimpses through the veil, empirical hints that our reality is not as solid, as real, or as fundamental as we have always believed? This is a journey to the very edge of perception, a deep dive into the moments when the source code of our universe seems to be showing through the seams. Let's begin our investigation with one of the most common, and yet most personally jarring categories of reported glitches, the temporal loop. This is the experience of a moment, a conversation, or a series of events repeating itself perfectly and inexplicably. It is crucial to distinguish this from déjà vu. Déjà vu is a feeling of familiarity, a subjective internal sensation that you've lived this moment before. A temporal loop, as described by those who experience it, is an objective, external repetition of reality. It is not a feeling, it is an event. One of the most famous and well-documented accounts of this phenomenon comes from a Reddit user who posted his story on the r/glitch_and_the_matrix subreddit, which has become the de facto global repository for these experiences. His story, which has since been shared and analyzed countless times across the internet, took place during a long family road trip through the desolate and beautiful landscapes of the American Southwest. He was a teenager at the time, sitting in the back of the family car with his younger sister, while his parents were in the front seats, his father driving. They were driving through a particularly remote and featureless stretch of desert highway. For miles, there had been nothing but sand, rock, the occasional, hardy desert plant, and the shimmering heat haze rising from the asphalt. Then, in the distance, they saw a welcome sight, a sign for a roadside diner. It was an old, classic-looking, standalone building with a faded, buzzing neon sign that simply read "Eat." His father, who was driving and feeling the fatigue of the road, decided it was a perfect place to stop for lunch. They pulled into the dusty, gravel parking lot. There was only one other vehicle there, an old, faded, light blue sedan. They got out of the car, stretched their legs, and went inside. The diner was quiet and empty, save for a single waitress behind the counter, leaning on her elbows and looking bored, and a lone customer, a man in a trucker hat, sitting at a booth in the far corner, staring silently into a cup of coffee. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a weary expression, came over and took their order. The narrator remembers the meal with perfect clarity. They all ordered burgers and fries. They ate their lunch, made some small talk, paid their bill at the register, left a tip on the table, and got back in the car. The whole experience was completely, utterly, and forgettably unremarkable. They pulled back onto the deserted highway and continued their journey south. The user remembers looking at the digital clock on the car's dashboard. About 45 minutes passed. They were deep in the desert again, the landscape unchanging, the diner a distant memory. And then, up ahead on the horizon, he saw it again. A sign for a roadside diner. It had a buzzing neon sign that simply read "Eat." His father, seemingly having no memory of their recent stop, said aloud, "Hey, a diner. I'm getting hungry. Let's stop for lunch." The user and his sister exchanged a confused, uneasy look in the back seat. They tried to tell their father that they had just eaten, that they had literally just been at this very diner. But their parents looked at them as if they were speaking another language, their expressions completely bewildered. They insisted that they had been driving for hours without a break, that they were both starving. From their perspective, the diner stop had never happened. Their 45-minute memory was a complete blank. Confused, and now genuinely unnerved, the user watched as his father pulled the car into the familiar, dusty, gravel parking lot. And there it was, the same faded, light blue sedan, parked in the exact same spot. They all walked inside. The diner was identical. The same layout, the same faded vinyl on the booths. The same waitress stood behind the counter, leaning on her elbows with the same tired expression. The same man in the trucker hat sat in the same corner booth, staring into the same half-full cup of coffee. The waitress walked over to their table. And then, she said the exact same words she had said to them 45 minutes earlier, with the same intonation, the same weary sigh. "What can I get for you folks today?" The user and his sister were frozen in a state of pure, adrenaline-fueled shock and disbelief. This wasn't just similar. It was a perfect, frame-for-frame, word-for-word replay of a moment in time. They were inside a loop. Their parents, oblivious, began to order burgers and fries. Terrified, the user's sister blurted out, "We were just here. You just served us burgers and fries." The waitress just stared at her, her expression completely blank, uncomprehending, as if she were a faulty program that had received an input it couldn't process. She looked at them as if they were crazy. The user, in a desperate attempt to break the script, to change a line of code, ordered a piece of apple pie instead of a burger. The rest of the meal played out in a haze of surreal, quiet terror for the two siblings, while their parents ate their burgers and chatted, completely unaware that anything was amiss. When they left the diner for the second time and got back on the highway, the strange, repeated event was never spoken of again by their parents. But for the user and his sister, it was a profound and deeply unsettling tear in the fabric of their reality. They had experienced a 45-minute segment of their lives, a segment that was somehow deleted from their parents' memory, and then replayed for them in perfect, terrifying, and inexplicable detail. What could possibly explain such an event? The rational scientific explanation would point to some form of shared delusion, a folie à deux, or perhaps a collective misremembering, an anomaly of memory brought on by the monotony and hypnotic effect of a long desert drive, a well-documented phenomenon known as highway hypnosis. But the sheer level of detail, the specific, shared, and independently corroborated experience between two separate people, makes this a difficult explanation to accept for those who actually lived it. For them, it was not a trick of the mind. It was a fundamental glitch in the world itself. This theme of looping reality, of time stuttering and repeating, appears again and again in these anecdotal accounts. Another user describes a far more mundane, but no less unsettling, experience at his workplace. He's sitting at his desk in an open-plan office. He decides he wants a cup of tea. He gets up from his desk to go to the shared kitchen at the end of the hall. As he walks down the hallway, he passes a colleague, a woman named Carol, who is walking the other way, back towards her desk. They exchange a brief, automatic hello. He gets to the kitchen, fills the electric kettle with water, clicks it on, and waits for it to boil. As he's waiting, he sees Carol walk past the kitchen doorway, continuing on her path. A completely normal, forgettable 2-minute slice of office life. He makes his tea and walks back to his desk. As he sits down, he feels a strange wave of disorientation, a feeling he describes as mental whiplash. He looks up from his computer screen, and he has the sudden, new, and powerful urge to go to the kitchen to make a cup of tea. The thought feels completely fresh, as if he hadn't just done it moments before. Confused and slightly amused at his own apparent forgetfulness, he gets up and starts walking down the hallway again. And then he sees her. His colleague Carol is walking towards him, just as she had been moments before, and she says the exact same hello, with the exact same intonation, the same slight smile. He is frozen in place. He is living the same 2 minutes over again. He said he stood there in the middle of the hallway for what felt like a full minute, completely paralyzed, a cold dread creeping up his spine, before he wordlessly turned around, went back to his desk, and tried to pretend to himself that it never happened. These time loop stories are one of the most philosophically terrifying categories of glitches. They directly challenge our most fundamental and deeply ingrained assumption that time is a linear, one-way street. They suggest that our experience of a linear past, a fleeting present, and an open future is not as stable or as fundamental as we think. It suggests that time, at least on a small local scale, can stutter, repeat, and overwrite itself like a skipping CD, a corrupted video file, or a piece of software stuck in a processing loop. From the looping of time, we move to another common and deeply unsettling category of reported glitches: the duplication of objects and people. These are stories where the world's asset rendering, to use a video game term, seems to go wrong, creating impossible, perfect copies where none should exist. Consider the story of a woman driving home from work on a busy, multi-lane highway during rush hour. She is driving in the middle lane of a 3-lane highway, surrounded by other cars. In the lane to her left, she notices a distinctive car that catches her eye. It's a bright yellow, classic Volkswagen Beetle, an older model. In the driver's seat is a woman with vibrant, curly red hair. The car is memorable, a splash of color in a sea of gray and silver sedans. For the next several minutes, the two cars are driving in rough parallel, occasionally jockeying for position in the moving traffic. The narrator glances over at the yellow Beetle several times. Then, the narrator needs to move into the right lane to prepare for her upcoming highway exit. She checks her rearview mirror, then her right side passenger mirror to check her blind spot, and her blood runs cold. In the lane to her right, driving at the exact same speed as her in perfect formation, is an identical bright yellow Volkswagen Beetle. And in the driver's seat is an identical woman with the same vibrant, curly red hair. For a moment, her brain refuses to process the information. She is utterly disoriented. She quickly looks to her left. The first yellow Beetle is still there, exactly where it should be. She looks back to her right. The second yellow Beetle is still there, a perfect, impossible mirror image. She is being flanked on a busy public highway by two identical, impossible cars, driven by two identical, impossible women. She said she felt a wave of pure, primal panic, a feeling that the world had suddenly become profoundly, fundamentally wrong. She floored the accelerator, weaving through traffic to get away from them, her heart pounding in her chest. When she finally dared to look in her rearview mirror a few moments later, both cars were gone, as if they had simply despawned from the simulation once she had broken the strange formation. What could possibly explain this? A simple, straightforward case of two very similar cars being on the same road at the same time. It's possible. There are many yellow Beetles in the world, but identical in every detail down to the driver flanking a single car at the same speed at the same moment. The probability of such a perfect coincidence becomes astronomically low. It feels less like a coincidence and more like a rendering error, a duplicated asset in the code of reality, a copy and paste command gone wrong. This duplication phenomenon isn't limited to inanimate objects. It also applies to people, in the form of deeply unsettling doppelganger encounters. A young man tells the story of going to a crowded rock concert with his girlfriend. They get separated in the dense, surging crowd near the stage. He spends a few minutes pushing through the crowd, looking for her. Then he spots her. She is about 20 feet away from him, standing near the sound mixing booth, talking to a person he recognizes as one of their mutual friends. He sees her distinctive green jacket, her specific, unique hairstyle. He is 100% certain that it is her. He starts to make his way towards her, calling out her name. But as he gets closer, his phone, in his pocket, begins to ring. He pulls it out and answers it. It's his girlfriend. She tells him she's sorry she got lost in the crowd, and that she's waiting for him by the main entrance at the very back of the venue, the spot where they had agreed to meet if they ever got separated. His blood runs cold. He looks back towards the sound booth. The woman in the green jacket, the perfect, living, breathing copy of his girlfriend, is gone. She has vanished into the crowd. He had seen a perfect, living, breathing copy of a person interacting with a real friend in a place where they could not possibly be. These stories lead us directly into the strangest, most bizarre, and most overtly simulated category of all reported glitches, the NPC behavior. NPC, or non-player character, is a term from the world of video games. It refers to the background characters that populate the game world, the shopkeepers, the townspeople, the guards, characters who are not controlled by a human player. They are controlled by the game's code, and they often have limited, repetitive, and sometimes faulty behavioral programming. They walk the same predetermined path over and over. They say the same few lines of dialogue whenever you interact with them. They are the illusion of life, but they are just part of the program, designed to make the world feel alive. And some of the most profoundly unsettling glitch stories involve encounters with real people who seem to be behaving like poorly programmed NPCs. A famous account, again from the r/glitch__matrix subreddit, tells of a man who was walking through a city park late one night. The park was mostly empty and quiet. He saw another man, walking a small dog on a leash, coming towards him on the same path. As they passed each other, the man with the dog gave a polite nod and said, "Good evening." The narrator nodded back and continued on his way. A few moments later, he patted his pockets and realized he had dropped his keys somewhere on the path. He cursed under his breath, turned around, and started to retrace his steps. And then he saw it. The man with the dog was still there, about 100 feet down the path. But he wasn't walking away. He was impossibly walking in place. His legs were moving in a perfect, fluid walking motion, but his body was not moving forward at all. The small dog beside him was doing the exact same thing, its little legs trotting furiously, but remaining in the exact same spot on the path. It was, the narrator said, exactly like a video game character that has become stuck on a piece of environmental geometry, its walking animation still playing on an endless loop. The narrator was so profoundly terrified by the deep, fundamental unnaturalness of the scene that he forgot all about his keys and ran out of the park as fast as he could. Another similar story describes a group of friends who are eating a late-night meal in a fast food restaurant. They are sitting in a booth eating their burgers and fries. At the table directly next to them is a familiar mother, a father, and a young son, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. The friends casually notice the family having a very specific and slightly strange interaction. The young son, while eating, accidentally drops his fork on the floor with a clatter. The mother sighs with a theatrical, weary parental exasperation. She picks up the fork, wipes it with a napkin from the dispenser, and hands it back to him. The father then says, in a stern but loving tone, "Be more careful with your things, son." The son looks down and replies, with a quiet, mumbled apology, "Sorry, Mom." A simple, mundane, slice-of-life family moment. The friends continue with their own conversation, thinking nothing of it. About 5 minutes later, they hear another, identical clatter from the next table. They instinctively look over. The young son at the next table has dropped his fork on the floor again. The mother sighs, with the exact same theatrical, weary parental exasperation. She picks up the fork, wipes it with a napkin from the dispenser in the exact same way, and hands it back to him. The father then leans forward and says, in the exact same tone of voice, with the exact same cadence, "Be more careful with your things, son." And the son, looking down at the table, replies with the exact same quiet, mumbled apology, "Sorry, Mom." The entire scene, every word, Every gesture, every sigh had replayed itself verbatim like a cut scene in a video game being triggered for a second time. The family was not interacting. They were running a script. The group of friends were so deeply unnerved that they got up and left their half-eaten food on the table, feeling as though they had witnessed something private, something fundamental, something they were not supposed to see. These NPC stories are perhaps the most existentially disturbing of all the glitches. The time loops and duplications are frightening because they challenge our understanding of physics. The NPC stories are frightening because they challenge our understanding of consciousness itself. They suggest that the rich, vibrant tapestry of human life that surrounds us, the billions of other people with their own thoughts, feelings, and free will, might not be as real or as autonomous as we think. They hint at the terrifying possibility that some, or perhaps all, of the people we see are simply background programs, sophisticated automatons designed to make the world feel populated and real for the player characters, whoever they or we might be. So, what are we to make of these thousands upon thousands of stories, shared by people from all walks of life, from all over the world? Are we to believe that our reality is a faulty, buggy simulation, prone to errors and rendering artifacts? Before we can seriously entertain such a radical and reality-shattering conclusion, we must give due diligence to the more rational, more sober, and more scientifically grounded explanations. And these explanations are primarily rooted in the strange, beautiful, and often profoundly unreliable workings of the human brain. Our brains are not passive, high-fidelity video cameras, recording reality with perfect, objective accuracy. They are active, predictive, and often flawed processors. They are constantly, and without our conscious awareness, taking shortcuts, making assumptions, and filling in the blanks to create a coherent, stable, and useful narrative of the world around us. And sometimes this complex, delicate, and largely unconscious process goes wrong. Take the time loop stories. Neurologists and psychologists have several theories that could explain these experiences without resorting to a breakdown in external reality. One is the idea of a jamais vu event, which is, in a sense, the opposite of the more famous déjà vu. Jamais vu is a momentary glitch in memory retrieval and recognition, where a familiar situation, person, or place is not recognized, making it feel new, strange, and unfamiliar. If this were to happen repeatedly over a short period, it could create the powerful, subjective experience of a loop, even if the external world was proceeding in a perfectly linear fashion. Another, more serious possibility is a type of microseizure or temporal lobe epilepsy. It is well documented that small, localized seizures in the temporal lobes of the brain, which are heavily involved in memory and time perception, can cause a wide range of strange and powerful distortions in consciousness, including looping thoughts, sensations of time speeding up or slowing down, and vivid, dreamlike hallucinations. The duplication and doppelganger events could be explained by well-known psychological phenomena like paramnesia, a distortion of memory where a person's memory of an object or a face is incorrectly transposed onto a new, similar object or face, creating a false but powerful sense of perfect identity. Our brains are, at their core, pattern recognition machines, and sometimes we see patterns that aren't really there. Two similar yellow cars on a highway can, in a moment of inattention or distraction, become two identical yellow cars in our reconstruction of the event. And the NPC behaviors? These could be attributed to a combination of pure, random coincidence and a powerful psychological quirk known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, or the frequency illusion. This is the well-documented phenomenon where, after noticing something for the first time, you have a tendency to notice it more often, leading you to believe incorrectly that it is happening with greater frequency. If you see a strange, repetitive behavior once, your brain is then primed and subconsciously on the lookout for it again, and you might interpret a completely unrelated, purely coincidental repetition as part of a larger, more sinister, and more meaningful pattern. These rational, neurological, and psychological explanations are plausible. They are scientifically grounded, and they are, for many people, a comforting way to explain away these deeply unsettling and reality-questioning experiences. It is far less existentially terrifying to believe that your own brain had a momentary, harmless glitch than it is to believe that the entire universe did. And yet, for the people who have had these experiences, for the ones who have lived through them, these explanations often feel thin, dismissive, and deeply unsatisfying. The experiences feel too real, too vivid, too externally consistent to be so easily dismissed as a simple trick of the mind. The siblings who experienced the looping diner both remember the same, specific, and impossible details. The woman who saw the two identical cars is certain of what she saw with her own eyes. The profound, visceral, and deeply somatic feeling that the world itself is wrong is a powerful one, and it is not easily shaken by a pat neurological explanation. This leaves us lingering on the simulation hypothesis itself. The idea that we are living in a computer simulation is not just the stuff of science fiction. It is a serious philosophical proposal that is gaining traction among some physicists and technologists. The argument, in its simplest form as articulated by Nick Bostrom, goes like this: if you assume that any civilization that reaches a sufficient level of technological maturity would be able to create a perfect, conscious simulation of reality, a base reality, and if you assume that such a civilization would be likely to create many, perhaps billions, of such simulations, then a simple matter of statistics dictates that it is far, far more likely that we are living inside one of the countless simulations than that we are the one original, base reality. If we accept this as even a remote possibility, then the thousands of glitch in the Matrix stories suddenly transform. They are no longer just brain glitches. They are potential evidence. They are the bugs in the software, the dropped frames, the moments where the limitations of the system's processing power or its underlying code become visible to its inhabitants. The looping events are a server resetting or a cached environmental event being replayed by mistake. The duplicated objects are a simple rendering error, a copied and pasted asset that wasn't properly deleted. The NPC behaviors are just that: the limited, scripted, and sometimes faulty routines of background programs designed to make the world feel populated and real. The world isn't breaking. It's just showing us the seams in its own construction. This is a dizzying, vertigo-inducing, and for many, a deeply terrifying thought. It fundamentally undermines our sense of agency, our sense of free will, our sense of the specialness and significance of our own existence. But it can also be, in a strange and paradoxical way, liberating. If this is all a simulation, then the rules of reality are not as fixed as we think. The nature of consciousness, of time, of physics itself, becomes a question to be explored, a program to be potentially hacked, not a set of immutable facts to be accepted. And perhaps the most compelling glitch of all, the most powerful piece of evidence for the simulation hypothesis, is the very fact that we are able to have this conversation. The fact that the inhabitants of this potential simulationists are able to conceive of the idea that we are in a simulation is itself a profound and recursive paradox. Is this a feature or is it a bug? Are we a program that has become self-aware, a piece of code that is beginning to question the nature of its own programming? Or is the very idea of the simulation hypothesis just another, more complex and sophisticated layer of the simulation itself, a fascinating philosophical distraction designed to keep us entertained and to keep us from ever discovering the real, underlying truth? We are left, as we so often are when we confront the deepest questions, in a state of profound and perhaps permanent uncertainty. The stories of glitches in the Matrix are compelling. They are numerous, and they are deeply, personally real to the people who experience them. They are the new folk tales of our technological age, shared not around a physical campfire, but on the global, digital forum of the Internet. They challenge our most basic and deeply held assumptions about the world we live in and our place within it. Whether these stories are ultimately proof of a simulated universe, or simply powerful evidence of the strange, beautiful, and deeply unreliable nature of our own consciousness, they serve a valuable and important purpose. They force us to question. They encourage us to look at the world around us with fresh eyes, to see the magic, the mystery, and the profound strangeness in the most mundane of moments. They remind us that the solid, predictable, and often boring reality we take for granted might just be a single, fragile layer, and that just beneath the surface of the ordinary, a world of infinite and perhaps terrifying possibility awaits. The next time you experience a moment of intense déjà vu, or see a staggering coincidence that defies the laws of probability, or witness something that just doesn't feel right on a fundamental level, pause for a moment. You might just be noticing a scratch on the film, a bug in the code, a fleeting, precious, and reality-shattering glimpse behind the curtain of the world itself. If this journey to the very edges of reality has sparked your own curiosity and your own questions, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the great, unanswered mysteries of our world. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of the unknown. And now, I invite you to share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever experienced what you would call a glitch in the matrix? A moment that made you seriously question the nature of reality? The collection of these stories is a collective, global project, and your personal experience might just be the piece of the puzzle that helps someone else make sense of their own impossible memory. Let's explore this strange, shared, and mind-bending mystery together. Because whether this world is real or simulated, it is the only one we have. And it is, without a shadow of a doubt, a very, very strange place.